Chapter 1. A Letter to the Reader. Dear reader, this book is written by an unknown author. That's the name I've chosen, and it's the only name you'll ever know. My identity is not nearly as important as yours. Suffice it to say that you may trust me. Everything in this book is true. I'll tell the story about the people of the Resistance and all that it meant at the time. Perhaps it means something to you now, but it will never mean anything to you like it did to us. The Resistance wasn't an explosion. Rather, it was a slow burn that turned to flame and then to fire. As to blame, I ask you to draw your own conclusions, for you now hold the truth in your hands. Sincerely yours, the unknown author. Chapter 2. The Beginning. Mildred was a young girl, but she didn't know it. Most 6-year-old girls didn't spend their evenings hiding in a closet, protecting their little brother, while trying to block out the sound of their drunk father with magical spells. Most young girls dressed dolls, went to bed with a full tummy, and had time to play. But not Mildred. "Look at the picture of the dragon, Jordan," Mildred whispered to her little brother, wincing when shattering glass crashed outside the small closet. "What color is it?" Father screamed something at Mother, but Mildred couldn't make out the words. "Green," Jordan promptly replied, but his wide brown eyes strayed back to the door when the bellowing ceased. Mother's calm voice responded, soothing some of Mildred's worry. Mother would calm Father down. She always did. Then he'd apologize and be kind for a day or two, before falling back into a sullen silence. "Very good," Mildred said, turning the page. Her right cheekbone throbbed every time she spoke, but she ignored it. Jordan was watching her warily, so she acted like nothing was wrong. "How about this dragon?" A candle trembled in the air next to them, held there by Mildred's weak ability to do magic. Beads of wax rolled down the candlestick, whose flame flickered eerily in the dark. A dollop of hot wax fell onto the back of her hand, but she ignored it. "This dragon is red, isn't it?" She pointed to a painted scene in the book, but Jordan wasn't looking. "Millie," he whined, pressing his hands to his ears and leaning into her side. "Make the yelling go away." A slam sounded. Father had thrown a chair this time, no doubt. They'd never have the currency to buy new furniture. Mildred pressed her hands to Jordan's ears and tried to think of an incantation that would block out sounds, but her mind had gone foggy. Her hand strayed to the tender skin covering the pulse in her cheek. Father had never struck her before tonight. She hoped Mother wouldn't have to spend the next day in bed like last time. "We can't make them stop fighting, Jordan." "I want Mother." She slapped a hand over his mouth. "Quiet!" she hissed, listening for the sound of approaching footsteps. Father often forgot about them during his Ipsum-fueled rage, but sometimes he remembered. Even Mother's protection spells couldn't stop him if he really wanted to open the closet door. She softened her voice when Jordan's lower lip trembled. "I'm sorry, Jordan," she said, gathering him into her lap. "I didn't mean to scare you, but we can't see Mother right now. She's locked us in here, remember?" He nodded. A long tear ran down his cheek from a wide brown eye. "Let's keep reading about dragons," she said, holding the book a bit higher. "Want to keep reading?" He hesitated, but finally nodded and ran an arm underneath his drippy nose. "Good," she said in a tremulous voice, wishing she could cry. "I'll sound out the words, and you tell me what color the dragon is, okay?" Halfway through the book, Mildred paused when the yelling stopped, followed by a heavy thud. Silence fell. Holding his breath, Jordan returned his eyes to the crack under the door. Not a sound. Mildred's heart pounded in her throat. Was Mother okay? Had Father left? Perhaps he'd passed out and they would escape over to Mrs. Tattleton's across the street until the next morning, like usual. Jordan grabbed Mildred's hand and held so tight it hurt. She wrapped her arm around his skinny body and waited. The silence seemed to last forever. A quiet murmur of voices eventually came. She strained to hear but found only hums. Mother's voice, then Mrs. Tattleton's, and then the deep reverberations of a male witch she didn't recognize. It wasn't Father. "Millie," Jordan whispered. "What's happening?" "I don't know." A long time later, the voices left, and Mildred heard the sound of feet approaching the closet door. Mildred hastily blew out the candle. It fell to the floor with a thud when she shoved Jordan into the corner and put herself in front of him just as the door opened a crack. "Mildred, Jordan," Mother's voice called as light spilled into the closet. "It's just me. You can come out now. It's safe." Jordan scrambled from behind his sister and threw himself into Mother's legs. Mildred clambered out behind him and followed suit with a cry of relief. Mother crouched down and hugged both of them, her brown hair shining with red highlights in the candlelight. "It's okay, children," she said in a soothing tone, though her hand trembled against Mildred's back. "We're safe now." Mildred glanced over Mother's shoulder to the kitchen, surprised to see their heavy iron frying pan sitting on the edge of the table. Mrs. Tattleton was kneeling on the floor, scrubbing the wooden boards with a heavy brush. The soap bubbles reflected a distinctive pinkish-red hue. "Where's Father?" Jordan asked. Mother pulled away. "He's gone," she said resolutely. She touched Mildred's swelling right cheek with the tender caress of a parent. "He's never going to hurt any of us again, I promise." Jordan buried himself deep in Mother's arms, letting free all his pent-up sobs. Mrs. Tattleton glanced up, saw Mildred watching, and blocked the stain on the floor with her body. No matter how 6-year-old Evelyn looked at it, the High Priestess was old. Her graying hair puffed out in cloud-like curls, and she spoke with the measured, even tones of a grandmother. Evelyn sighed. Why had Mama insisted she meet the High Priestess? She didn't care about an old witch, even if she did help rule the Central Network and act as Mama's boss. It wasn't that Evelyn was afraid. Nothing scared Evelyn. Not even the chance of the gypsies wandering through Chatham City at night. But the High Priestess smelled like talc, and it made her want to sneeze. Evelyn put her hand under her nose, already feeling the preliminary tickle. "Bring her in here, Marcia," the High Priestess said. "I do love children. You speak so much about her. I can't wait to see her red hair." Evelyn leaned away from the doorway and back toward the hallway. She didn't want to have tea with an old lady. What would they talk about? Mama turned to the door and waved. "Come in, Evelyn." Evelyn shook her head of bobbed red hair. No way was she going in there, no matter how much she loved Mama. "Evie, come on." Mama's voice sounded encouraging, but the stern "listen to me right now" press of her lips appeared, so Evelyn stepped away and leaned against the wall. She contemplated running down the hallway, past the guardians standing by the stairs, and into the kitchens to beg Mrs. F. to hide her. Then she wouldn't have to smell the dry talc powder and pretend to be friends with a raisin. "What are you doing?" Mama asked, stepping into the hall and snatching Evelyn's wrists before she could run. Mama's thick Chatham City accent was even more pronounced when she was angry. "You can't play these childish games." "Mama, please," Evelyn whispered, trying to tug her hand away. "She smells funny." Mama's eyebrows, so light they almost didn't exist, lowered until her eyes became skinny lines. "She doesn't either. Now, will you be on your best behavior tonight and be kind to the High Priestess, or your father will hear about it?" Evelyn stiffened. Mama never threatened to invoke Papa unless she meant business. "But, Mama, the High Priestess is a very busy witch, Evie," Mama said, her voice softening as she lowered into a crouch next to her. "Sometimes she gets very sad. So sad she can't even get out of bed. I thought that bringing you here might cheer her up and stop her from getting so sad because you're so young and happy. Just try, for me." Evelyn stared deep into Mama's sea-green eyes. She adored Mama and would do anything for her. "Fine," Evie mumbled, picking at the bow on the front of her dress. "I'll try, for ya." "Thank ya," Mama said, batting Evelyn's hand away from the half-bow, retying it and then straightening. "Do you remember what I taught you to say?" "Yes." Evelyn followed a few steps behind Mama, dragging her feet as she went, so it was clear this was not on her agenda for the night. She stood in front of the old woman with her eyes downcast. "Marry me, High Priestess," Evelyn mumbled, studying the white velvet slippers that covered the High Priestess's veiny feet. "I'm grateful to meet ya." "Marry me, Evelyn," the High Priestess said, peering down at her from where she sat at a vanity table filled with powders, ointments, and potions that older witches used to keep wrinkles away. "How are you?" "Good," Evelyn said, taking Mama's hand and glancing over the contents of the vanity table. "Are you putting ointment on your face to stop the wrinkles? Because it's not working. You should try a different one." The High Priestess's eyes popped wide open the same instant Mama grabbed Evelyn's shoulder with hands of steel. "Evelyn!" Mama hissed through her teeth. "Apologize right now." To Evelyn's astonishment, the corners of the High Priestess's lips twitched. Her eyes went from kind to surprised, clearly enough that Evelyn knew she wasn't mad. At least, not like Mama, whose vice-like grip had tightened. "Mama," she whined, "that hurts." "Your Highness, I deeply apologize," Mama said, bowing, her face a flaming red that matched her hair. "I never imagined that she would." The High Priestess waved a hand, smiling. "Don't worry, Marcia. She's right. I do need new cream for my skin. I shall write the apothecary tomorrow. I've been meaning to for several days now. She simply provided the motivation. You have very pretty red hair, Evelyn. I've heard much about it. Thank ya, she responded promptly, as Mama had taught her to do. Mama said it matches my personality. Red hair in the Central Network was rare, so witches in the markets flocked to her with comments and questions. There's that little redhead, they'd say to their friends, waving. I see her here all the time. Don't you just love her freckles? Evelyn basked in the attention because there was nothing she loved more, except maybe all the pretty trinkets in the castle. They had a few trinkets at home, to prove we aren't poor, we're middle class, as Papa always said. None of their trinkets were as pretty as the ones here. The High Priestess smiled. I'll bet your hair does match your personality. I think you're a very bright, energetic girl. I am. We're working on our humility, Marcia said, brushing the hair out of Evelyn's eyes. Evelyn leaned away with a scowl. Don't, the High Priestess said in a whimsical tone. She's perfect just the way she is. Evelyn stared at the High Priestess with new eyes. Perhaps this old lady wasn't so bad, even if she was saggy. Mama says I was born talking, Evelyn said. I like to talk to other witches. Sometimes I get in trouble for making Mama late, and then Papa gets angry and yells so that... Yes, well, I'm sure the High Priestess has things to do, Marcia said, interrupting her daughter with a nervous smile. Say merry part to the High Priestess, Evelyn. Oh, don't go yet, the High Priestess said. You haven't even had tea. Oh, do you have cookies? I love cookies with tea, but we only get them at home on birthdays and special holidays. Evelyn leaned toward the High Priestess and whispered, Sugar is bad for your teeth. A call came from the hallway before Mama could admonish Evelyn for asking. Marcia! The High Priestess smiled at Evelyn, but this time her eyes twinkled. Yes, we have lots of cookies, she said with a little hop in her voice that reminded Evelyn of a jumping game. You can eat as many as you want. Evelyn's mouth dropped. What? Are you sure you want her to stay, High Priestess? Marcia asked, glancing at the door. Yes, of course. Evie's a delightful little girl. She made my day bright just by being here. Go, take care of what's needed. We'll be here in the meantime. You can call me Evie because I said it's okay, Evelyn piped up, lest the High Priestess think she was above getting permission. I only like some people calling me that, like Millie and Stella, but you can be one of them because you're nice. I thought you'd smell like talc, but now you smell like cookies. The High Priestess chuckled. Marcia hovered, glancing from her daughter to the hallway. Really, Marcia? The High Priestess insisted with a dismissive wave of her hand. Just for tea while you sort things out. It shall make me very happy. I think Evie and I are going to be great friends. Evelyn smiled so wide at Mama that her cheeks hurt, but Marcia finally relented, so the discomfort was worth it. Evelyn jumped with a cry of joy. What could be more fun than tea in a castle? And tugged on the High Priestess's soft hands. Let's go, Evelyn cried impatiently. I'll pour the tea because I'm afraid you won't do it right. Mama taught me how, and I'm really good at it. I'll teach you. I'm a good teacher. Chapter 3. The Witch's Oath. Mildred carefully dunked a stack of wooden plates into the steamy bucket of dishwasher bubbling with soap. Next to her stood her best friend Evelyn, perched on a similar stool, in front of a similar tub, with her own stack of dishes to wash. What happened? Evelyn asked, eyeing Mildred's right cheek, which had a faint black and purple bruise. Unlike Mildred, who didn't have a splash of water on her apron, Evelyn was half soaked. I fell, Mildred said, and knocked it on the stairs. Evelyn shot her a knowing look. Both of them had fathers driven to drink Ipsum because of poverty, or, in Evelyn's case, bad memories from his job as a guardian. Didn't hide fast enough? Evelyn asked with a sympathetic look. Mildred hesitated, then nodded. Evelyn gestured to the side of her head with a grimace. Me either. Mrs. F., the head cook for Chatham Castle, bustled up from behind them to set 3 more plates on their pile. There are my 3 hard-working girls, Mrs. F. cried with a warm smile. Tufts of hair peeked out from underneath her round white hat, and a frilly apron hung all the way to her knees. Recipe cards hovered around her head in a circular dance, reminding her of dishes to be cooked. Mildred was glad Mrs. F. had shown up. Now she didn't have to explain to Evelyn that father would never come back. It made her stomach hurt just thinking about it. Thank you for helping with the breakfast dishes, as always, Mrs. F. said, already moving on again, recipe cards in tow. Don't be late for class now. They continued their soapy chore in silence. Evelyn's mother was an upper-floor maid at the castle, which meant she could afford the uniforms and had some education. Mildred's mother, Vanessa, worked in the kitchen. She didn't have currency or much official education, so she worked with bread and pastries. Both Evelyn and Mildred cleaned dishes every morning to pay for their breakfast at the castle. Jordan was too young to work as a fireboy, so he stayed with Mrs. Tattleton. "I found a spider in my bedroom last night," Evelyn said, her nose wrinkling with delighted disgust. "And I pulled his legs off, the way Papa taught me. It was so gross. The legs kept moving." Mildred grimaced. Pulling the legs off spiders didn't seem very kind. She opened her mouth to reply, but Evelyn kept talking. "And I stayed up late practicing for Miss Sonia's lesson today." To demonstrate, Evelyn used a magical spell to lift several bubbles from the suds. They hovered in the air 10 seconds before popping. Evelyn's bright red braid flopped around her neck like a fish when she turned to Mildred. "Well?" she asked, eyebrows lifted. "What about ya?" Mildred had been practicing how to raise objects with a levitation spell for the past week. Whenever she did it at home by herself, she managed. Most of the time. Whenever she had to do it in front of others, well... "It's fine," Mildred said, grabbing a few more plates. "Come on, we have to hurry or we'll be late for class." The idea of being late to anything sent a shiver of fear through Mildred, and she went back to her work with singular determination. Evelyn played with the bubbles instead, chattering about the guardians who had complimented her bright hair that morning. Mildred ended up washing and drying far more than her fair share. "Hurry!" Evelyn commanded as they scampered down the hallway. "We're going to be late!" Their classroom was tucked into a deep corner of the servants' quarters. 15 pupils attended, all children of other castle employees. Stella, the final component of their trio, met them in the classroom with a bright smile. Stella's father was the assistant to Councilmember Porter, and they lived at the castle because her father worked all the time. Like Evelyn and Mildred, Stella's birthday was also during the 3rd month of summer, which meant all of them would turn 7 in 2 more months. "Merry meet," Stella said. Her blue dress, which matched her lovely eyes, was illuminated by the light from the tall windows. "Merry meet, Stella," Evelyn replied. "I can't wait to show you what I can do with magic. Papa taught me a new spell last night with—" "There she is," called a young fire boy from the other side of the room, his dirty arm pointing at the 3 of them. "It's Mildred Graham, the witch who can't do magic. She can't even buy new shoes. She's so poor, the dirt stays away from her." "She thinks she's so much better than us, though," called another. "She doesn't even talk with an accent." Mildred's cheeks burned hot with shame when the rest of the students exploded in tittering laughter. Stella stepped up to Mildred's side with a gasp of shock. Evelyn whipped around to face the bullies, fire in her eyes, hands stacked on her hips. "Hey!" Evelyn yelled back. "You don't know anything, Charlie. You can't even remember your letters, can ya? Mildred's my friend, my best friend. You want to make fun of her? You gotta go through me." Charlie, whose cheeks were smudged with charcoal, hesitated. The other's chortling died down. "I'm not scared," he said, swallowing. "You should be." Evelyn took a step toward him. He leapt back. "I'll hex you until you're cross-eyed for the rest of your life, you obnoxious cow. I know your daddy, and he's the worst drunk in Chatham City." Charlie recoiled when she moved closer, then stopped and tried to square his shoulders. But even his friend shuffled back, leaving him standing alone before Evelyn's wrath. He shrank away. "That's what I thought, coward," she muttered, then moved her sharp gaze to his friends. "If anyone has a problem with Mildred, you take it up with me, got it? She's got a mama who doesn't have an accent, but that doesn't mean she's putting on airs." They nodded haphazardly, scrambling when Miss Sonia soared into the room. "Take your seats, everyone," she called, clapping 3 times. "To your seats." The girls slipped into their shared bench at the very back of the room without another word, though Evelyn tracked Charlie and his friends all the way to their desk. Mildred sat in the middle of the bench and reached for Evelyn's and Stella's hands with a firm squeeze. "Thank you," she whispered, and Evelyn winked. "No one makes fun of my friends." "I trust all of you practiced over the weekend," Miss Sonia called in a sing-song. A scroll flew from her desk and into her hand. "We shall demonstrate our levitation spells after I finish roll." Dread dropped into Mildred's stomach like a heavy stone. Now that Charlie had humiliated her, it would be even more difficult to do magic in front of other witches. The words always froze in her mouth like a chunk of ice. Too soon, Miss Sonia set down the attendance scroll. "Evelyn Ringer, you shall demonstrate first." Evelyn strode to the front of the room, the ends of her dress swaying around her legs. Instead of levitating the feather that Miss Sonia had provided on the table at the front, she lifted Charlie's stack of books, using magic to move them to the far end of the room, where they flew out the open window. Miss Sonia shot her a disapproving glare. "Evelyn," she drawled. "Oh, very well, Miss Sonia," she said, and summoned the books back with another spell, one that Mildred wouldn't have been able to do if she'd tried endlessly for days. The books returned with a plop in front of the sulking Charlie. Evelyn gave him a triumphant smile and flounced back to her seat. "That'll show him," she muttered when she fell back into the chair with her usual gusto. Mildred swallowed hard, already sensing that Miss Sonia would call on her next. Her mind fluttered like a rising flock of birds. What would she do now? A simple levitation spell was beyond her ability. Now that Evelyn had embarrassed Charlie, he'd really make fun of Mildred for not being good with magic. "Mildred Graham," Miss Sonia said, "how about you go next?" "You'll do great, Millie," Stella whispered, squeezing her hand one last time. "Just concentrate like we practiced after class last week." The walk to the front of the classroom felt interminable. Mildred looked to Miss Sonia, who gave her an encouraging smile, and down at the feather, avoiding the quiet taunts of Charlie and his friends. "Easy," she reminded herself, gathering the words for the incantation. "It will be easy." But the words for the incantation had fled, dissolving into the teasing voices of her peers. "There she is, the witch who can't do magic. Mildred's the dumbest student in class. She's so poor that she uses sticks to eat her porridge." She tried to shove their voices into the back of her mind, but it didn't work. Oh, why couldn't she remember the words? "Put your back to the classroom," Miss Sonia said when silence prevailed for too long. "Sometimes that helps." Mildred mumbled a few magical words under her breath. Instead of lifting into the air, the feather caught on fire. "Oh no!" Mildred cried, scrambling forward. "I didn't—" Miss Sonia cast another spell, and the feather snuffed out before Mildred could get to it. The smell of singed hair curled in her nostrils. The smell of failure. "It's okay, Mildred," Miss Sonia said with a patient smile. "I get nervous in front of other witches, too. Come and see me after class, and we'll try again." Mildred gratefully returned to her seat, eyes averted. Charlie and his friends remained silent, watching Evelyn's clenched fist from the corner of their eyes. They let Mildred pass without bothering her. "You did great, Millie," Stella whispered with a comforting smile. Evelyn patted her on the back. "You'll show them one day, Millie," she said. "I just know you will." Relieved to be amongst friends again, Mildred pushed her embarrassment from her mind and focused her whole attention on the lesson. "It's all right, Mildred. Keep working. Magic isn't easy for every witch, you know." Miss Sonia patted her on the back as Mildred's simple illumination spell failed to light a candle yet again. The cold wick seemed to mock her. "Thank you, Miss Sonia," she whispered, sliding off the bench and gathering her books. A week had passed since her last embarrassing failure in front of the class, and though she'd remained behind every day for more instruction, she still struggled with levitation and illumination. "I'm sure Stella and Evelyn are waiting for you outside." Mildred nodded, then slipped into the hall, books in hand. Her friends weren't there like usual, so she kept walking until she found them just down the hall. Stella and Evelyn were huddled together, their ears pressed to Mrs. F's office door. Evelyn moved to the side to give Stella more room, her face scrunched into a worried expression. "Stella?" Mildred asked. "Evie?" Evelyn glanced up, then seeing Mildred standing in the hallway, waved frantically for her to join them. They wore solemn, intent faces. "What are you doing?" Mildred whispered. Evelyn put a finger against her lips. Stella pulled Mildred in close. "We overheard your name when we were walking by," she whispered. "Just when your mother walked into Mrs. F's office. Evelyn put a listening incantation on the door so we could hear what they were saying about you." Mildred wedged herself between her two friends and pressed her ear to the door. "What will you do with only one income, Vanessa?" Mrs. F asked, her voice muffled through the heavy wood. "You know the rest of the kitchen staff will help you in any way you need." Mildred's heart leapt into her throat. Did her family need help? Was something wrong? "Without two incomes, we can't afford rent where we live now," Mother replied. I'm going to find a place on the outskirts of the city that won't be so expensive." "You should try York," Mrs. F. said. "I grew up there. It would be a lovely, safe place for your kids while you're at work." "I suppose I can transport here every day." "York is in the country, so there isn't as much crime as Chatham City, but it's still in the suburbs. It's a quiet, quaint little place. No doubt Mildred will like being away from the city." Mildred glanced at her two friends with equal anxiety. Move to a place called York? Her stomach recoiled with the thought of leaving her friends. "Mildred will be happy to get away." "She won't be able to come to work with you like she does now," Mrs. F. pointed out. "She's so happy here, and Sonia said she's just starting to get over the worst of her shyness." Mother sighed. "I can enroll Mildred in a common school in York. She'll continue to learn magic there, even if she's not with her friends. The good gods know she needs practice. I could bring her in every now and then to see Stella and Evelyn." Stella reached out and grasped Mildred's hand. All three girls pressed harder into the door. "Will you be able to afford food on your own?" "I think so. We'll have to scrape by for a while." "I'll make sure to send any scraps home that you may need. Everything will be all right, Vanessa, now that he can't hurt you anymore." Mildred felt that cold feeling in her stomach. "Now that he can't hurt you anymore." Mother and Mrs. F's conversation faded into a discussion over warming dishes that needed new incantations. Evelyn pushed away from the door, and all three girls tiptoed to a hidden alcove down the wall.
"What will we do?"
Stella wailed, wringing her hands together.
"We can't let Mildred leave."
"I can't stay if Mother's leaving," Mildred said. Evelyn's lips were a hard, thin line that meant she was thinking. She would come up with something, surely. She always had good ideas Mildred could never have dreamed up on her own.
"You could transport,"
Evelyn cried.
"Just transport to see us every day."
Mildred shook her head.
"I'm only 6. I can't learn that until I'm older. Besides, I can barely levitate a feather."
Evelyn's shoulders fell and her lips slipped back into their narrowed lines of thought.
"You can move in with Stella." "Oh, yes,"
Stella cried.
"Then you could see your mother while she's at work."
Mildred shook her head.
"Mother wouldn't let me. Besides, I'd miss my brother."
A full 10 minutes of agitated silence passed.
"We can't stop it,"
Evelyn concluded, as grim as Mildred.
"You will have to listen to your mother and go where she says."
Mildred could hardly comprehend a change so drastic. Not see her friends each morning? Not laugh with Evelyn while washing dishes? It didn't make any sense. First Father left, and now she had to leave. She just wanted all the changes to stop.
"I'll write you all the time,"
Stella promised, her eyes filling with tears.
"You won't even feel like you're gone."
"Me also," Evelyn said.
"Just because you aren't here doesn't mean we can't still be best friends. I'll make sure we stay friends." "Your mother said she'll bring you to school every now and then,"
Stella said, trying to find something happy because that's what Stella always did.
"Everything will be okay."
Evelyn glanced at the bruise on Mildred's cheek.
"Now that you mean Father is gone, it'll be okay."
Mildred absently touched the sensitive skin, reliving the moment she saw the back of Father's hand flying toward her. She shrank away from the memory with a shudder. She'd miss both of her friends desperately. Their soothing presence brought such comfort into her confusing life.
"I know,"
Stella cried.
"Let's make a witch's oath. Together we'll be strong enough to seal it."
Evelyn's bright green eyes lit up.
"Yes, we'll promise to write each other at least once a week. Then, when I get older and better at magic, I'll transport to you all the time, Millie. We'll never really be apart if we have the witch's oath to seal us."
"Yes," Mildred squealed, and the three of them giggled. Evelyn stuck her little finger into the middle of their group.
"We'll promise to always be best friends to the very end,"
Stella said as she hooked her finger with Evelyn's. Mildred looped her finger around the others. They all grinned and began the incantation for a simple witch's oath, with hushed, childish whispers.
"We make an oath on the honor of all witches who have come, who will come, and who shall ever be,"
they chanted in unison.
"We shall be friends to the very end."
A thin gray line appeared around their left pinkies, the symbol of the witch's oath. They inspected their hands and fell into each other's arms, laughing as if nothing bad had ever happened to them, nor ever would again. Chapter 4. Changes. The fire crackled merrily in the hearth one fall evening, illuminating High Priestess Nell's personal chambers with a bright light for Evelyn to play by. Remnants of her 7th birthday party littered the table. A new tea set, crumbs from the cake of which she'd greedily consumed 2 slices, and the brown wrapping paper that held most of her presents. Nell had never enjoyed a mess more. She glanced at the clock. Evelyn's mother, Marcia, had been called away from the celebration hours before and hadn't returned. Evelyn spent most evenings with Nell now, keeping the usual dark depression Nell suffered from at bay, with her witty comments and bossy attitude. But never had Marcia been so late picking her up. "Are you getting tired, Evie?" Nell asked, looking on the girl with fondness. Her red hair was so luminous and her skin so pale. Playing quietly on the floor, she looked like the porcelain doll Nell had just given her. Even her blue silk dress matched the doll's frock. Evelyn wasn't a naturally beautiful child, but her impish smile held plenty of sway over most witches.
"No,"
Evelyn said.
"I just want to play with my dolls."
Nell chuckled and stared half-heartedly at the tottering pile of envelopes awaiting her response. Playing with Evelyn was much more enjoyable than working because she could, for just a moment, imagine that Evelyn was her daughter, a blessing that could never be. "Have you finished your homework?" Nell asked.
"Yes, Nell."
"And responded to Mildred's letter?" Evelyn nodded with a long-suffering sigh.
"Yes, Nell, you need to work,"
she said, sending Nell a ripe look of authority with her green eyes, standing with her hands on her hips.
"You've been playing with me all day. Mama says I'm a distraction and shouldn't bother you. She won't let me visit you after school every day if I get in your way."
Nell smiled. Paperwork scattered her lap desk. She had much work to do, as usual. "You're the best distraction, Evie. And your accent is improving. You aren't changing O's into A's as much."
"I know. I forget sometimes. But most of the time I'm perfect."
A knock sounded on the door.
"Mama's here!"
Evelyn cried, then ran to Nell's side with a frown.
"Nell, I don't want to go home,"
she whispered, her lips falling in the same irresistible pucker that too often earned her cookies for dinner. Evelyn lowered her eyes to the ground and finished with a mumble.
"Papa was in a bad mood this morning. I don't want to see him again."
But it wasn't Marcia. A tear-stained maid opened the door just a crack and motioned for the High Priestess to come into the hall. A worrying thought tickled Nell's mind. The maids would never beckon unless... "It's not your mama yet, pretty girl," Nell said in a bright, cheery voice. "Looks like the maids need me. How about you go find your new tea set and give your doll a drink before she goes to bed? It will help her sleep." Evelyn hesitated, her young eyes calculating, and for a second Nell worried that she hadn't hidden her concern well enough. Then Evelyn gave in with a sigh.
"Good idea, but you can't have any cookies this late."
"I agree," Nell said, standing. "I'll join you when I've finished."
"Don't be gone long,"
Evelyn retorted with high-handed command.
"I'll wait for you here. Come right back."
Nell smiled to set her at ease. The maid paced back and forth outside the bedroom, wringing her hands. "What is it, Sylvie?" Nell asked, closing the door behind her.
"There's been a terrible accident,"
Sylvie whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "What happened?"
"Marcia's dead."
Nell grabbed the table in the hall to steady herself. "Explain," she said.
"Marcia transported into a riot in Chatham City when she went to the apothecary. I don't even know why they were rioting. I just know that she was killed in the melee, and they just found her body."
"Tobacco," Nell whispered hoarsely, the color draining from her face. "The poor and the gypsies threatened to riot over the new tax Donovan placed on tobacco. I told him not to do it, the fool!" Sylvie sucked on her front teeth, the way she always did when nervous.
"The Guardians are dealing with the riots now, but it sounds like nearly 20 witches have died. I just found out and came up here right away."
"Where is her husband, Xavier?"
"Still very sick at home."
Sylvie shook her head.
"He's taken the plague that swept through Chatham City, so Evelyn can't return home yet. The apothecary said it's not likely Xavier will survive the night either. He didn't get the right potion in time because Marcia didn't return."
Nell paused, listening to Evelyn playing inside, speaking for her doll, imploring for cookies. The doll's hopes were dashed when Evelyn refused her.
"What about Evelyn?"
Sylvie asked, tearing up again.
"We'll have to send her to an orphanage if Xavier dies."
"No," Nell snapped. "We'll not do any such thing."
"But High Priestess, she..."
"Needs a family. Let me handle her. I'll tell her the bad news myself. It needs to come from me. We'll work out all the other details later." Nell pressed a hand to her forehead.
"Goodness, how shall I say it?"
Sylvie said nothing. Nell composed herself by taking several long, slow breaths. Thank you, Sylvie. Please remain out here for further instructions. Nell steeled herself as she returned, trying to predict what Evie's reaction would be. How could she tell the girl, who believed the sun revolved around Marcia, that she would never see her again? Could a 7-year-old comprehend so final an end? Was the grave little more than a nightmarish chasm? You took too long, Evelyn said, sticking out her pink bottom lip in a pout and folding her arms across her chest. She gave Nell her back in a familiar move she employed when she didn't get what she wanted. Evie, darling, come here. I have something to tell you. No, let's not be like that. Nell's heart swelled with compassion and fear. Was she up for this? Could she care for and adequately love this fire-driven child? Evelyn peered over her shoulder, her lashes fluttering with an angelic look that destroyed all Nell's hesitations. Can we talk? The little girl let out a dramatic sigh before walking to Nell. Evelyn's eyelids drooped and her jaw quivered as she fought back a yawn. Nell brushed a stray red curl out of her face. I just had some news of your mother, Evie. She faltered but pressed on. There's been a terrible accident. Evelyn stood stock still, staring at Nell through her round, freckled face. Like Marcia, Evelyn's eyebrows were so red and faint they almost appeared translucent. What happened? She asked. Did a horse die in a carriage crash? I saw that happen once. No, darling. Marcia was in an accident today. She won't be coming back to get you tonight. Evelyn's nostrils flared in fear. She doesn't want me. Oh, no, Nell said. That's not it at all. Marcia was caught in a very bad place tonight, and she died. Your mama is gone, sweetheart. Evelyn blinked 3 times. What about Papa? Is he still sick? Yes, so sick that you can't see him right now. Evelyn's face went blank. She turned around and walked over to her dolls. Mama'll be by later, she said. You'll see, Nell. She'll be back tomorrow. Nell opened her mouth to protest, but stopped. Evelyn wouldn't comprehend what her mother's death meant, not yet. Nell sat in a silence that was broken only by the clink of Evelyn's doll trying to take tea. The quiet continued until Nell stood up, swallowed her tears, and held out her hand. Come, Evie, let's get you to bed. We can start a new day tomorrow. To her surprise, and for the first time, the child offered no resistance. She tucked her doll under her arm and solemnly took Nell's hand. Nell set Evelyn into her own sprawling bed, made sure she had a fuzzy blanket, and sat at her side until Evelyn dropped into the wispy breathing of sleep. She stared at her chubby cheeks, her scattered freckles, and swore a silent oath. Even if Xavier lived, which seemed unlikely, Nell would take the girl. She would give Evelyn the education she deserved. She'd have a family here at the castle, and above all, she'd have Nell to dote on her and personally see to her comfort. In lieu of her parents, Evelyn would have Nell and everything. First month of fall.
Dear Stella, sorry I haven't written much lately. We've been very busy. My new house in York is very small. All of us sleep in the same room, and the floor is dirt, but Mother seems happy, so I'm happy. I miss you and Evelyn. Mother says I can come to work with her before winter sets in. We'll have to walk the whole way, which she says will take a couple of hours, but I won't mind. How is the castle? Is Evelyn still very sad about her mama and papa? I've written her 5 letters, but haven't heard back. It was boring turning 7 without you. Mildred.
Second month of winter.
Dear Mildred, Evelyn and I miss you very much. The castle is the same as always. Evelyn doesn't do dishes ever since the High Priestess adopted her, but she comes to class with Miss Sonia still. Evelyn doesn't talk about being sad, even though I know she is. I don't see her after school as much anymore. She spends most of her time with the High Priestess. Miss Sonia told me to tell you that she says merry meet. I miss you in class. Stella.
Third month of summer.
Millie, happy birthday! Can you believe we're 8 years old now? Nell gave me a brand new dress made of silk and so many hair ribbons that I can't wear them all. I'm sending a few to you for your birthday present. I hope they arrive. Stella has matching ones, so we can all wear the same hair ribbons. You won't look as pretty as me because you don't have red hair, but I think you'll still like them. Are you afraid to start the new year of school? I'm sure this year will be better for you. You won't be the slowest student, Millie, like you think. Just keep working hard. I know you can do it. Nell tutors me, and it's hard sometimes too, especially when I miss Mama, but I keep learning. If anyone tries to tease ya, just let me know. I'll take care of them. Maybe Nell would let me send guardians after them. I must go have tea with a few council members. Nell lets me follow her everywhere because I don't like to be alone. I don't go to the boring meetings, though, because I'd rather just play in the gardens. Everyone likes talking to me. I love it. Evie.
3rd month of summer.
Dear Stella, happy 12th birthday. Have you and your family moved to the Northern Covens yet? I'll bet you're excited that your father is going to be one of the coven leaders over Newberry. Were you very sad to leave Evelyn? I'm glad we were able to do another sleepover at the castle before you moved. It was so much fun to play in the gardens when it was dark outside. When Evelyn fell in the fountain, I thought I'd laugh until my sides burst. Life in York is quiet like always, which I love. I hate going into Chatham City now. It's so loud. Good news, I just finished summer school. My teacher says if I keep working this hard to learn magic, I should be able to get into a network school. Wouldn't it be nice to go to classes together? I wouldn't be so frightened if you or Evelyn were there. What if we all made it into Miss Mabel's school for girls? It seems like too much to hope for. I must go. I'm working at the grocer's to earn currency. I'm saving it all to pay for tuition, if I can actually get in. But I must plan ahead or we won't be able to afford it. Mother says I can learn to transport next year, which means we'll be able to see each other more often. Now that I'm not in school, I promised Jordan I'd climb the apple trees with him more often, too, so maybe I'll send you a few from the top. Your friend, Mildred.
2nd month of spring.
Dear Evelyn, the Northern Covens are lonely without you around. Papa is always busy as a coven leader now, but we live in such a big house, and the orchards here are so fun that I don't mind so much. Sometimes I miss the castle, but I like the fresh air and quiet. Mildred came to stay the night last week, and she loved it here. When are you coming? We turned 14 this summer, which means we'll be able to interview with the Watcher next year to see if we are accepted into a network school. Mildred is working so hard to earn currency. She's cleaning houses now, I think. Do you think all of us could make it into school together? I hope for it every night. Our witch's oath always brings me comfort that we'll eventually be together again. Tell me more about all the dances you're going to with Nell. Do you get to wear a ball gown? Do you dance with anyone? I'm very jealous. Please tell me everything. Your life at the castle is so much more exciting than mine. All my love, Stella.
Chapter 5. Finding the Future. No matter how many times Evelyn stamped her foot in objection, Nell remained firm. You must go to a network school, Evelyn. You simply must. You're 14 years old now, and it's already the 1st month of spring. You'll turn 15 in the summer, which means you'll be ready to go when school begins in the fall. But I don't want to leave the castle, Evelyn said. I'll be so lonely without you. I loathe partings. Remember how sad I become when Stella and Mildred leave after their visits? Unbidden, a memory of Mamma's face shuddered from the depths of Evelyn's mind. She shook it away, forcing her thoughts from the bleak depths of fear. Mamma had left once, and she never came back. What if she went to school and Nell died? Evelyn knew she was too old to throw such a fit, but it didn't matter. Leaving the castle to live somewhere else was downright terrifying. Not to mention she'd be leaving her many adoring friends behind. Most of the council members and coven leaders cherished her here at Chatham Castle. What if they forgot about her? Worst of all, what if she wasn't popular and didn't make friends? She'd die. She'd simply die. Both Millie and Stella have appointments with the Watcher already, Nell pointed out. They said so in their last letter. Maybe all 3 of you will be placed in the same school. Evelyn hesitated. If there was anything good about going to school, it would be Stella and Millie's company. Well, I do want to see them again, but there's no guarantee the Watcher will put us in the same school. I shall be alone. Don't you want to learn and become a great leader? Can't I do that here? Nell's maid, Leslie, interrupted by knocking on the door and peeking inside. Your 3 o'clock appointment is here to see you, Your Highness. Nell sent a quiet warning glance at Evelyn. Send her in, Leslie, and please prepare the tea. Evelyn gave in with a resigned sigh. It wasn't often that she couldn't sway Nell over to her side in one way or another, but today Nell's face held that stern look that meant Evelyn wouldn't win. A slender witch with raven black hair and a slight underbite introduced herself with a perfect curtsy. My given name is Mabel, but I go by May. the stranger said in a quiet voice. "I am the head witch of Miss Mabel's school for girls." Nell bestowed a silent nod of approval, but Evelyn acted as if May weren't there. Instead, she ordered Leslie about unnecessarily, instructing her on duties she had already performed. That way, May would know who was really in charge. Despite not wanting to leave Nell, Evelyn had an inner desire to have, and be, the best of everything. Miss Mabel's school for girls was certainly the best the network education system had to offer. If she must go away, it would be the only place she'd go. "Please have a seat, May." Nell gestured to an elegant chair with light green backing and rolled arms. Leslie set the tray on the table, curtsied, and moved to the other side of the room. "Evelyn, you may now pour the tea." Evelyn watched May with unusual attentiveness. She was thin and attractive, but not extravagant, with bright blue eyes and pale skin. Her maroon dress was exquisite but tasteful, and the delicate lace along the edges testified to a wealthy background. She seemed aloof, which piqued Evelyn's interest. "Merry meet, Evelyn," May said, settling on the chair across from her. "I'm always glad to meet a possible future student." Evelyn smiled. "I understand how unusual a meeting like this is for you," Nell said to May, sitting next to Evelyn on the couch and straightening her skirts. "We both appreciate you being here." "I don't mind coming to discuss a student beforehand," May said. "It's an honor that you are considering my school above all the others. Of course, you know that Isadora has to give her final approval to any student attending my school." "Yes, we know about Isadora," Nell said, glancing at Evelyn. "I'm very hopeful that she will see the potential in Evelyn. I give Evelyn only the very best, you see. She was born to be a leader, and with the proper grooming, I believe she shall change the world." May smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm sure there's great potential." Instead of feeling annoyed, Evelyn wondered why this witch didn't immediately give reassurances regarding Evelyn's certain success, the way everyone else did. Rare indeed. Evelyn used an incantation to pour the tea into the cups, then sent May hers on a cream-colored saucer. May received the cup without a single acknowledgement or thank you. Evelyn next sent a tray of tea sandwiches, but May refused, and said nothing about Evelyn's magical skills. Evelyn's interest deepened. How unusual. "I want Evelyn to have the best education possible," Nell said, "which is why I brought you here to ask if you'd be willing to tutor her personally." If May was surprised by the request, she didn't show it. "I'm always open to requests," May said, "but I will not give private tutorship the first 2 years of her stay." "Not even as a personal request from the High Priestess?" Nell didn't often throw her title around to get what she wanted, but this unexpected situation must have called for it. Evelyn held her breath. "Don't take my refusal personally, High Priestess. I really must say that, in fairness to the other students. Evelyn needs to prove herself worthy. I don't coddle to privilege, unless talent and education justifies the work." Nell set down her teacup and gave May her whole attention. A flicker in her eyes suggested surprise, perhaps annoyance. "How so?" "For one, Miss Mabel's school for girls still participates in the competition, so I can't tutor just any student," May said after another sip of tea. Nell's mouth rounded in an understanding circle. "I see. If Evelyn is to have a one-on-one education with you, she must first enter the competition as a third year and win?" Regret seemed to creep into May's mournful tone. "Yes, that would be my exact expectation. I can't make any exceptions. There are many gifted witches out there, and I wouldn't want to diminish their experience for one who isn't as committed. What I can do, however, is promise to keep a special eye on Evelyn during her third year, if she doesn't win." That did it. Evelyn could handle May's lack of blatant adoration, but refusing Nell was too much. Her curiosity turned to flame. How dare May insinuate that Evelyn wasn't intelligent enough to win? "You think I'm not clever enough to win the competition?" Evelyn asked, eyes blazing. May stared at her with an aloof, studious glance. "Are you prepared for my honest reply?" May asked. Her tea drifted back to the table when she folded her hands on her lap in an easy gesture. "I'd expect nothing less." "Then no," May said. "You seem like a spoiled little girl that doesn't have any emotional control. Such a student would not do well in my private lessons. I have very high expectations of my pupils." Evelyn clenched her fists, barely able to contain her fury. The nerve of this witch! Evelyn might have things that others didn't, but she had lost everything before she gained it. What could May know about her life? Consistently strong magical control does not occur without emotional control, May continued, her voice rising into an instructive tone. Most teenage girls have neither emotional nor magical control. She turned to Nell. If I take her as a student, I will demand that she go through the first 2 years of school to learn those skills. At that point, I would permit her to enter the competition and win her chance to be my pupil. Otherwise, I should be doing all 3 of us a disservice. Nell leaned back in her seat. I'm not accustomed to being refused, but I respect your reasons. A lesser witch would have given me what I wanted simply because of my political position. It may not be what you wanted to hear, High Priestess, May said, but it would be disrespectful for me to be involved in anything that wasn't for the best of the network. If you truly want Evelyn to be a leader, she'll have to earn it. Evelyn blinked, slowed her breathing, and settled back in the chair. Her anger abated and her face cooled. I'll do it, she thought with impressive resolution. May doesn't think I can win the competition. I'll win it, and I'll be her pupil. I know I can. I'll give her a reason to like me. By the time I leave, she won't be able to refuse approving of me. If I'm chosen for your school, I shall be happy to learn whatever you want to teach. Evelyn picked up her cup of tea and sipped it like nothing had occurred in the meantime. May asked the High Priestess a question regarding the new head of education and ignored Evelyn for the rest of their tea. You can't fool a watcher, Mother said in her usual clipped tone as they passed York's Red Brick Bakery and the grocer's stall filled with fat winter squash and cool weather greens. Don't try to inflate yourself. Mildred rolled her eyes. Really, Mother? I'm just saying what I must, Mother said, elbowing Mildred into an alley. You don't have any control over whether you are accepted into Miss Mabel's School for Girls with Stella and Evelyn, so don't even stress over it. The Watcher will put you where you belong. What if the Watcher doesn't accept me? Mildred asked, her stomach curling in fear. Watchers had the rare ability to perceive personality traits. The most powerful Watchers could view glimpses of the future. The network paid them to decide who had the talent and skill needed to attend a network school. Mother glared. Don't even say it. You've worked twice as hard to perfect your magic as anyone else. I'm sure you'll be accepted. A gust of early summer wind escorted them to the schoolhouse, rustling Mildred's shoulder-length hair. She batted it out of her eyes in frustration, wishing Mother would let her chop it all off. She didn't have time to fuss over her looks. The thought of so many girls in one school scares me, Mildred said. You'll have to learn how to deal with it. Mother dodged a horse-drawn carriage and nodded to the driver. Mildred scowled. What would it be like to live away from Mother's steep expectations and constant demands that she improve her magic and overcome her shyness? Perhaps a school full of strangers wouldn't be the worst thing. Teenage girls are confusing and emotional, Mildred muttered. You are no exception to confusing and emotional, Mildred. Just remember your goal. That'll make it easier. Her goal, yes. There was nothing Mildred wanted more than to have the power to create change, to be somebody, to get out of poverty, to achieve as much as Stella and Evelyn, although she had started with so little. But above all, she just wanted to make Mother proud. Besides, Mother said, you'll never be a council member if you don't earn your surplus at a network school. Mildred looked down at her wrist and thought about the circular tattoo received at the beginning of the school year. Knowing she might attend the same school as Stella and Evelyn gave her strength. She rubbed the pale skin on her wrist as if the surplus were already there, then realized she'd fallen behind and scrambled to catch up. Mother could never simply walk anywhere. She always moved with purpose and determination, even just across the room. They continued in silence until they arrived at the school to find Mildred's teacher, Miss Sarah, speaking to an old woman with graying hair. There you are, Miss Sarah said, glancing at the clock. Right on time, as usual. Mildred, Vanessa, this is Isadora. She's the watcher for all the network schools right now, so she's quite busy. Isadora smiled. One of her eyes was hazel, the other olive green. Mother nudged Mildred with a sharp jab of her elbow. Mildred curtsied. Merry meet, Isadora. Merry meet, Mildred. Isadora patted the desk next to her while Mother and Miss Sarah withdrew from the room. Have a seat. They sat side by side in separate wooden desks, but didn't look at each other. Mildred let out a breath of relief. It would be easier to answer the questions if she didn't have to look Isadora right in the eyes. Mildred waited for Isadora to start for several minutes. You intrigue me, Mildred, Isadora eventually said. Of all the students I've ever interviewed, I've never met one with such a quiet personality. I didn't even detect you until you were already at the door. Mildred kept her eyes on the chalkboard. The familiarity of the classroom eased her initial nervousness.
Perhaps that's because my mother's personality is so strong,
Mildred said. Isadora's laugh startled Mildred. Another stretch of silence passed before Mildred turned to find Isadora staring at the fire, musing.
Aren't you supposed to ask me questions?
Mildred asked. Yes, but I find speaking to strangers to be very draining.
Are you saying that to set me at ease?
Mildred asked, convinced that Isadora had an angle behind the comment. No witch came right out and admitted that they didn't like social requirements. No? Do you think I'm obligated to put you at ease? Not knowing how to respond, Mildred remained quiet. Perhaps this wasn't a witch she could frighten away with her usual abruptness. The thought didn't comfort her. Talking to strangers is part of my career, Isadora said, but that doesn't mean I enjoy it. It exhausts me.
Then why do you do it?
It's what I was meant to do. Sometimes we fight our destiny because of our fears, when what we really need to do is learn how to make destiny work for us. The words fell like barbs in the fleshy part of Mildred's heart. A flood of shame, of insecurity, and then uncertainty swept through her. She hadn't expected Isadora to infiltrate so deep into her mind after only a brief exchange. Besides, Isadora continued, I learn the most about someone by what they do not say. Mildred unwillingly fell into Isadora's conversation.
What do you mean?
You don't like small talk, Isadora said, as if she had a private vein into Mildred's mind. You speak only if required, regardless of whether there's an awkward silence. That tells me that you don't care about social conventions, which tells me that you have a strong sense of right and wrong.
If you have such an insight into my mind, then you must know that I'm uncomfortable with attending an all-girls school without my two best friends with me.
Yes, Isadora said. I do know that.
And?
And what?
Would you put me in the same school as them?
No. Mildred straightened, bristling.
Even though I'm not comfortable being with so many other girls my age.
I think you're very smart, Isadora said, laughing. I wouldn't want to attend school with that many girls either.
Oh, I didn't expect you to agree.
Attending an all-girls school is the only way to get what you really want, Isadora said with a twinkle in her eye. You know that already, which is why you're here. Mildred's heart began to pound.
What exactly do you see that I want?
To be somebody, Isadora said easily, as if they were discussing what type of tea Mildred would take. You want to make a difference in the lives of witches like you, so they don't have to grow up in the same poverty. You also want to make your mother proud. But beneath all this stoic bluster, and perhaps your greatest motivation of all, is a girl that just wants to measure up to her friends, who always had more than she did. Isadora's easy reading of her mind was unnerving. Mildred turned away, annoyed by this wily witch, despite her lack of discernible ill intent. Isadora kept her observations so neutral that Mildred couldn't even distrust her. In fact, Isadora continued amicably, you have such a strong desire to lead, to prove yourself to a silent audience that doesn't exist outside your head, that you're going to attend Miss Jane's School for Girls, even though you're deeply frightened. You have stronger emotions than any witch I've ever met. You just hide them behind your arrogance exceptionally well.
Miss Jane's?
Mildred asked. She'd heard of it before. Respectable, but it certainly wasn't the top of the list.
But what are my chances of?
Miss Mabel's is not the right school for you, Isadora said, anticipating her question. Trust me, your magical ability is not good enough yet. Sending you to Miss Mabel's would alter the course of your life, and possibly the network, in ways you can't imagine. Mildred deflated.
Oh.
Now, Isadora said, slapping the desk with a sprightly clap of her hand, I have some advice for you before you start Miss Jane's. Do not nurse your weaknesses as you do now. Mildred opened her mouth to protest, but Isadora cut her off. "You're not at all gifted socially. You never will be. Find 1 or 2 witches with whom to be friends with when you start school. It will help. Take alone time when you need it, but don't let it become an excuse. Also, keep working on your magic. I know it's difficult for you, but eventually, with dedication, time, and patience, you'll be very powerful. Does that sound manageable?" Very powerful with magic? No one had ever said that to her. "Yes." "Wonderful. I'll tell Miss Jane that you shall be a member of her school starting in the fall." Isadora hopped up. She was impressively spry for her age, and called for Miss Sarah and Mother to rejoin them. By the time their chatter faded, Mildred had filed all of Isadora's advice into a special place in her mind, and managed to smile and curtsy in parting. The surge of relief she'd felt at being accepted ebbed away. "The good gods," she thought shakily. "What have I gotten myself into?"